Thank you, everybody, for joining this meeting. This is the Police and Community Together meeting. I am Lieutenant Chris Vance. We're going to go around before we start and just kind of introduce everybody. Justin Williams, can you please introduce yourself?
Yeah, as you said, my name is Justin Williams. For anybody who might be listening, myself, Matt, you see him on the call. We are representatives of Black building leaders and advancing the community together. We help found the Police and Community Together initiative, so that way we can try to bring an open forum and a voice to the community, and kind of come up with some resolutions that we think are needed in this time.
All right, Elder John.
Yes,
you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. My name is John Stevenson. I am host and producer of the Vision of Change radio show podcast. Also, I am the church administrator at Victory Christian Church International.
All right, great. Thank you for joining us today, sir. Matt, can you want to introduce yourself?
Justin did a brief introduction, but again, I'm with Black building leaders and advancing the community as well. And, like what Justin said, just a piggyback, we're just here to find a solution and be a segue to the community and to the police so we can find solutions.
All right, sounds great. Dan Lane.
Dan Lane with the Community Services Office.
That was a quick one.
Yeah, very short and sweet,
How about Kim Jones? You want to introduce yourself?
I'm Kim Jones. I am, just like Dan, the Community Service Officer, but I'm for the Montgomery County Police, the 6th District, which covers the Montgomery Village, Gaithersburg area.
Okay. And Lieutenant Sean Eastman?
Hey, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Sean Eastman. I am the Special Operations Bureau Lieutenant for the Gaithersburg Police Department. And like I was just saying before everybody got here, it took me 84 hours to get this backdrop in there, but do appreciate working with PACT. It has been a great relationship, and looking forward to continuing on.
All right, great. And Lieutenant Helton.
How you doing, everybody? I think I got to meet some of you all. For the last meeting briefly. I'm a deputy commander for the 6th District. I work with Kim. I've worked with Kim for a long time. Folks in the city. I've only been here a few months. I was with our community engagement division for Montgomery County, so I got to go all around the county. I didn't do a whole lot here in the 6th District in Gaithersburg City because basically between the city and Kim, they all hold down the fort pretty well. And they don't, I wouldn't need to come here much, but I really appreciate you all having me here, an opportunity to speak with you all. So thanks.
And I think before you go, Lieutenant Vance, I think we got Lori Ann in as well.
Yep, she's the next person I'm going to ask to introduce herself. Thank you for joining us.
Of course. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Lori Ann Sales, council member from the city of Gaithersburg. Happy to join and look forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And I am Lieutenant Chris Vance. I am the Operations Bureau Commander, which is the patrol bureau, all the people in uniform running calls for service. And so, Justin, do you want to kind of talk about what you guys started this summer and then what led up to us being introduced to each other?
Of course. For anybody who might be listening in or anybody in the future who might be watching this, we hosted a few protests against police use of force over the summer. Started roughly around the George Floyd murder that we all got a chance to see and voice our opinions on, but we found after those protests that the best way to go about the police reform in the future was to work together with our local law enforcement and whoever else is willing to work with us, so that way we can come to a common resolution. We found that it wasn't necessarily the community against the police or the police against the community, because at the end of the day, we can't live without the police. I mean, there will always be crime, there will be a need for police officers, but we did notice that there was, of course, some things that can be changed and should be changed, and we're here to advocate for that and be a solution-oriented group, so that way we can come away with the best of both worlds.
Yeah, so it was so you organized a Lake Forest Mall protest, and that's where we met. So we were able to work together and partner in town. And if I'm, mischaracterizing that, go ahead and let me know. But we worked together, and I thought that was a really powerful event, the Lake Forest Mall protest. You guys did an incredible job organizing it. You guys reached out to us and worked with us to, make sure that it was an event that was safe for everybody involved. And we were able to provide some resources to you guys, and it was a good partnership. And that started our conversations, just on the side, just talking about different things. And we started talking about, different police reform or police issues, various police issues. We talked about school resource officers. We talked about use of force and different ideas that are out there. And that's where this partnership really began. And then finally, at one point, Justin looked at me and said, "So now what? Now what are we going to do?" I said, "Well, let's start working together." And we started working together, and we started having these meetings, and they've evolved. At first they were in person, and then we as COVID started to ramp back up, we decided it's probably better to go back to a virtual environment, but also it's easier for us to put our discussions out to the community so we can get more engagement and observations in the community. But we've had some pretty good discussions. We had an opportunity to bring Matt and Justin and John in for some of our training to give them a perspective of what training that we provide, but also what officers go through in the street. And then we also had an opportunity to bring Justin in to one of my supervisors' meetings, so he could talk to my supervisors about why he was doing the protest this summer and some of the issues that he saw. And I thought that was we had some really good discussions in that meeting, and I look forward at our next all hands meeting in 2021. We're gonna do fair and partial policing training for every single officer. And so we plan on bringing Justin back in to talk to every single officer in the department. And I think, opening up that communication and working together is key. And it's actually led, talking to Justin, led to some of, internal discussions about how do we police in a change in our strategy and how we're policing, so that we're focusing on developing relationships in the community. We're focusing on enhancing trust and legitimacy in the police. And then we have to do that in every single call for service, every single contact. We got to be professional and disciplined and go out there and not focus on enforcement. And that's really led to, statistically, a reduction in our traffic stops, arrests, and in our enforcement component, and an increase in our non-enforcement contacts. So we appreciate all the feedback that you guys have given us. We are listening to what you guys are saying, and that's part of the relationship that we have.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that you mischaracterized that at all, because at the end of the day, it's kind of how it really played out. And between myself, Matt being at those protests and organizing them, and Elder John was there, and Lead Lori Ann Sales was there. We even went to one of her events, the Talk, Walk, and Listen. She helped organize and run. And it's about all of us, right? Everybody who's on this call, for some way, shape, or form, has a vested interest in the positive feedback from this group, and as well as the positive things that can come out of it. And I think that's, as long as we keep that and our hearts are in it and we keep our goals in mind, I can't see us really going wrong.
Yeah. And this is going to, and these meetings is your meeting. It's not our meeting. We're not going to, pick the topics or what you want to discuss. Usually it's like, hey, what do you want to talk about next meeting? And I get, the people who need, the experts that we need to bring into the discussion. We've had a meeting where we talked about mental illness and how the police respond to those, school resource officers. And I think we're, the school resource officer and other topics we got to come back and revisit so that's recorded. We had a really good meeting on school resource officers that wasn't recorded. So we want to redo that one.
And I definitely think, sorry for being Mike Hog, but I believe you segued very, very seamlessly into what we're here to do today, right?
Exactly.
Understandably, I want to go over kind of some ground rules and things for anybody who might be watching, anybody who's on this call. If you haven't been on these calls before, and we have a good way of kind of handling our business. But today, we want to definitely bring up the topics for the future calls that we're going to have. We want to make sure that we have engagement around what these calls look like, what we discuss, make sure that it's important, because at the end of the day, it's not the people on this call who dictate that, it's what's important for our community and our well-being. But understandably, with the latest police-involved shooting, that is the hot topic, right? That's the one that I think everybody has on their mind of what we really want to talk about and what anybody who might be listening in really wants to hear about. And we have discussed and reserved some significant time in doing that. But I do want to see what we can get out of the way as far as how we want to structure the meetings going forward. And just, of course, everyone being respectful of what we're trying to do here with PACT. And then on top of that, being respectful of everybody's time and what they do have to say opinion-wise, so that way we can kind of get through this seamlessly. At the end of the day, PACT is going to be bigger than one meeting, one topic. This initiative was set so that we can have future success and major changes in our county, community, and neighborhood.
Exactly. So I would like to just kind of go over a summary of the incident and the basic information that we have, and then kind of talk about the process that we're.
Let's get to those topics that we can try to run through first. Let's take 10, maybe 15 minutes. We can try to get through those topics for the next meetings. I know, Matt, I think I'm gonna pass the mic to you because I know we came up with a few that might even need to be written down. And then we'll say, like I said, the last roughly hour, we can go over all those details.
Roger. Gotcha.
So, good afternoon. I know one of the topics we was talking about, basically educating the community about certain traffic stops on what certain rights that you have. I know that we was thinking about reaching out to get a lawyer on and see what we can do and kind of educate them on what type of rights they have. Another thing was basically, go more in depth with police reform and understanding the training aspects. Let me grab my notes real quick because 1 second.
Well, while you grab your notes, Elder John, you want to fill in on that one?
Yeah. We were discussing. We wanted to know the process that will come into play as far as investigations. We did discuss, Matt and Justin and I had a meeting, and we wanted to talk about, we wanted to plan what we wanted to talk about for the year. But as Matt was alluding, we were discussing what are processes. When he mentioned about bringing an attorney onto the panel, we have found that sometimes, if you watch some of the videos that we've seen on social media, we'll hear people say, well, I need your supervisor to come out. Well, is that something that legally can be done in Maryland, Montgomery County, or the city of Gaithersburg? Is it required to have ID on you at all times? We hear different things where folks say, well, this state, it doesn't require it. But, as far as being transparent for the community, we felt as if, okay, if we have someone legal on the panel during that particular discussion, then it won't, well, that's what the police say. Well, no, what's the legal law? And it could be that some of the officers don't know what's legal as well, and so it would be beneficial to all of us that if we had someone that could discuss some of those things in one of our meetings. So we said that could be a meeting. We thought about, depending on what time of year it is, we could possibly just theme something around that particular time of year. Right now, it's cold. We know it's COVID, but once COVID, the restrictions are lifted and it gets warmer, what are some of the things that we might want to address? We did talk about revisiting the things that we discussed in maybe 4 months ago with Dan. Dan and Kim were talking about getting the bus that they have and getting out into the communities so that we can ensure that we're practically outside of just having these meetings and talking, we can put some legs to some of the things that we've talked about. So, put some action items together and what are some timelines that we want to implement to make sure that we're getting done what we are discussing. I think that also builds a lot of trust to, because people can log on and see us meeting and, but okay, what are you guys doing? Justin brought up a very good point, and I'll say it for those who are watching. He says, we're just bringing the police into certain neighborhoods. It will look like they're over policed. Okay, why are you in this neighborhood as opposed to other neighborhoods? So we want to discuss what are some ways that we could engage the community without looking like a certain particular community is being over policed. Justin, Matt, you ready to jump in? I know we're doing double dutch here, Matt.
I mean, if Matt's willing to jump in after Matt, I definitely, me, you, and Matt are constantly on these calls. We're constantly talking off the call. I would love to hear what Lori Ann has to say, seeing that she's a council member of the city.
Absolutely.
I think her input on, what the community would really like to see, discuss, and learn from is going to be imperative.
Thank you for that. I thought Matt was going to share the list of remaining topics for the year, but I'll definitely jump in and just, I'm glad that the police and residents are discussing improving community relations between law enforcement and the community. My hope is that any committee that's formed in our city is used as an advisory component. And they're usually tasked with certain deliverables or action items or goals. And so while I commend everyone for having these enlightening conversations, I would love to see what the end goal is going to be for this. I don't know if we're looking at what other jurisdictions are doing across the state so that we can look to those best practices for improving policing. I believe I shared with the chief what's happening in the city of Annapolis. They actually formed a police oversight accountability board. And so we already have a police advisory board in the city of Gaithersburg. So, I just wanted to see what the difference is between our police advisory board and this board. We have residents on the police advisory board. So I was just really surprised that we were having these conversations and not engaging a full spectrum of our community, not recruiting residents from all across our city to ensure that they can weigh in and offer some guidance about what's happening in their community. I think the last recording I saw was from a lady who lives in one of our apartment complexes. I don't know if she's joining us today, but it would be nice to have someone from all the different sections of our community join in on these calls. So, we have county police officers, we have our city officers. So it would just be helpful if we're going to have a full discussion about how to improve police and community relations in our city. I'd want to ensure that our residents could be in attendance as well.
Let me ask you this. So, of course, the people on this call, this is kind of thought of just from happenstance that we were just meeting and talking and we decided to do this. Our goal is that. How would you see us going about reaching out to people to get them more engaged and more involved outside of a police advisory board that has those select citizens on there? Our goal is that everybody has a voice. We have a public section where people can ask questions from the outside, but I guarantee you there's going to be limited engagement. It's based off of what we can share on social media, et cetera, for the people that are here. How would you say we go about doing it? I'm intrigued.
So that's why I recommend us looking at best practices. And so some of the advisory boards that have been formed in other jurisdictions are similar to how we staff our current boards, committees, and commissions. We have a formal articles of incorporation, some guidance about what they're being tasked with, and then a formal process of what the qualifications would be to serve on a committee like this, to include training so that participants are well versed in the trainings that our officers undergo, And we have a similar program like that now, I think, with the Citizens Police Academy. But we can always find templates. I don't believe in creating the wheel. I know that there are many great programs out there that we can definitely look at and see what we like, see what we don't like, and then make recommendations and then put it out there on our website that we're recruiting for members to join in this conversation and to better guide how we do business and make decisions moving forward. That's what I would propose.
Would you mind putting that website in the chat for us so that people can see that?
Definitely.
And then Matt, since I know we want to dedicate a whole lot of time to the recent police involved shooting, can you go ahead and wrap up the topics that you had listed that you wanted to discuss?
Definitely.
Can I step in here while Matt is preparing and say something? Just to speak towards some of the things that Councilmember Lorianne had mentioned. She referenced a lot towards the city of Gaithersburg. I think our intent wasn't just to focus on the city of Gaithersburg. It did start with Gaithersburg because the protests were in Gaithersburg, and the meeting between Lieutenant Vance and Justin happened. But I think with each meeting, we've had Montgomery County Police involved. So possibly we settle on, are we just focusing on Gaithersburg, or is this something that we're looking for all residents in Montgomery County?
Yeah, I mean, it's for everybody. I think you hit the nail on the head, is that we've had Montgomery County Police in here, but we also have the intentions that we're not recreating the wheel, but we might be adding a spoke or two in there, right? You know, when you add in the 100 spokes, we got a spoke or two in there where we're trying to add in more forums, more platforms where people can be heard. I know from firsthand experience, when you have, let's say, something that's run by the county council, right? Or something a state delegate's doing, you might not have the wherewithal to know when and where those things are going to transpire. They might not always be hitting people where you can get the information. You know, when you look at the age of social media, you're looking at Instagram, so, you know, Facebook, and then you look at places like the neighborhood app and, you know, the demographics that they're going to reach. This is our way that we found that we can reach a demographic that we're encompassing, right? I'm a 34-year-old Black man from Montgomery County, lived in Germantown for 30 plus years. The way I'm going to reach the people that I know and talk to is this way. Right. And then you have stuff, I think that kind of like Lorianne was saying, that there's committees and council members and things involved. There's a formal process of doing things. I can tell you the people I deal with are pretty informal, right? And I think we can really get a wider range of people in the county, like you said, Elder John, to be involved in police reform in community happenings by attacking it from all angles. And of course, our goal is not to stop with the county, right? If this is something that's successful, right, and let's say every county, every state has their own committees and things of involvement where they can be reached, you know, to get their opinions, right? But where has that really gotten us? And I think if this is something that is shown to be successful down the road, we've only done 3 or 4 meetings, and then one of them wasn't recorded, like you know, Lieutenant Vance said. One of them was just in person, where it was maybe 4 or 5 of us in the church. You remember, Elder John? And a lot of it is just, you know, we're talking it through and we're working it out. And if it becomes overly successful, then this is something we can copy and paste to a Rockville city, to an Annapolis. And it's where the success is found that's getting you where you need to go, right? And what we have today is getting us in certain places, certain avenues, but then you have a whole segment of people who might not be feeling like they're heard, and maybe they have something adverse to say to what's already going on. And I think our goal is to encompass everyone. There is no exclusion. This is all going to be about inclusion, especially going forward as this thing, you know, like Officer Van says, we have guest speakers and things like that. But the conversations we're having are very important outside of just meeting in a committee to say, here's the policy we want in place. Sometimes it's about, you know, we have a lawyer on board to sit here and talk about what you can and can't do at a traffic stop. Whereas we sit on social media all day and watch these guys go viral for being stopped by somebody in Georgia, and they're saying, I have a right to do this, that, and the third. And we're like, well, I wonder what my rights are here and there. I personally have never seen anything like that, and I think we can provide that in the small forum and platform we have. But I might have taken up too many minutes, because I want to definitely get to Matt so we can move on. Does that answer your question, Elder John? I think so.
Yeah.
Well, I think before you get to Elder John, I'm not sure if our participants are familiar with the county's Reimagining Policing Board. So the county executive has a Reimagining Policing Board. I believe they have come out with recommendations, or they will be coming out with recommendations. The county council also has a Reimagining Policing Board as well. So there are two different boards discussing improvements around policing across the county. But I would think that a committee or a convening of conversations around policing hosted by the City of Gaithersburg staff would include City of Gaithersburg residents. And so that's my concern with our hosting, and no residents from the city are included on this call. So.
Those are actually, that's actually a great bring up. The two advisory boards, and this is what I was kind of bringing up, right, is that everyone doesn't necessarily have the same wherewithal to get to that information, right? Is that something that you feel you can put up for us to find actively? Because I agree with you. The more people who are involved in not only this, but those advisory boards, or at least even if it's a selected committee, they have a chance to be selected, I think is important.
I don't mean to segue into, but I'll just give you a few of the topics because there's still more that we're still discussing. But I know, don't mean to cut it off short, but I do want to move on. And I do agree with you, Lori Ann Sales, about getting more residents in, especially they have a voice in the community as well. But I know we've talked about like domestic violence, on what we can do with that. I know that's a high need right now within that community. What can you do for help? Where do you go? Like a lot of individuals are, they go through these type of situations. Me personally, I know somebody who's basically died from domestic violence. So I think more information, safe havens, where they need to go. I think that's a good topic we discussed. Another one is,
and these are topics roughly outside of the stuff that we kind of already brought up that are major hot topics, like the SRO program.
Yeah.
Like you said, mental health can really tie into the domestic abuse stuff. But these are things outside of that, right, Matt?
Yeah, and also, what's the dire need? Like discuss about what's the dire need for the community in itself. Like what can we do to contribute as a whole, as a collective, and not just starting with just Gaithersburg community, but like I said, we want to branch out throughout the whole county, because I mean not just Gaithersburg that is actually hurting, but our counterpart counties are actually hurting as well. So, certain subjects like that, we discussed a lot. I don't have the full length because it's all been discussion, but that's what we're leaning towards.
Unless there's a lasting statement here, I know that everybody's really anxious to really kind of talk about this latest police involved shooting, and that leaves us the last hour to kind of go over that. Also, Vance, anybody want to drop a last jewel before we move on to that?
Nope.
All right, I think you wanted to lead us in on that, right?
Yes. So I just want to give a summary of what we have right now, or the information that we have available to release, and then where we're at in the process as we move forward with the criminal investigation that's ongoing. So on Friday, January 8th, we had an officer-involved shooting that resulted in the death of Mr. Kwamino Okron. This is a tragic loss of life, and we understand there are many questions about what led up to this shooting. What we know to this point is that the Street Crimes Unit received credible information that Mr. Okron was carrying a firearm. He had a criminal history for robbery and gun offenses and was recently released from incarceration. And they believed that he was going to commit another robbery. Based on that information, surveillance was initiated on Mr. Okron on January 8th. When at that point, 4 on-duty plainclothes officers attempted to stop Mr. Okron in the area of 14 South Frederick Avenue. They identified themselves as police officers and he had fled on foot. At approximately 5:53 p.m., a shooting occurred and Mr. Okron was shot. Officers attempted life-saving measures and radioed for medical personnel to assist, but unfortunately, Mr. Okron was declared deceased at the scene. A handgun was recovered from the scene. As part of a long-standing agreement between the Gaithersburg Police Department and Montgomery County Police, and as many police reform efforts recommend, an independent outside agency is conducting the criminal investigation into this incident. The Montgomery County Police Major Crimes Division has been tasked with conducting the independent criminal investigation to identify the facts of the case. Then the investigation results will be forwarded to the Howard County State's Attorney's Office for an independent review of the facts to determine if criminal charges will be filed. I certainly understand that the community has many questions about this incident and want to answer they want answers and additional information as soon as possible. We ask for your patience during this investigation process so we can see all the facts of the case and make a fact-based assessment of what happened. Unfortunately, one of the drawbacks of an outside agency conducting an independent criminal investigation is that we, the Gaithersburg Police Department, do not control the investigation nor the release of information during the investigative and state's attorney review process. Doing so could compromise their investigation and, if needed, a prosecution process. With an independent investigation, we are literally put on the sidelines as we are the ones being investigated. We're not conducting the investigation. Although we're trying to be as transparent as possible, at this point of the process, we cannot release any additional details about the shooting. Since the Howard County State's Attorney's Office has the responsibility of conducting the final criminal review of the facts of the case, they are responsible for determining what information is being released at this process. However, I am confident that at the end of the process, the facts will be publicly released so the community can make a fact-based assessment of what occurred. So at this time, I want to welcome any questions, discussions about the investigation process in general, concept of transparency, what information can and can't be released in these type of incidents, and other questions about police procedures. But as I stated before, I can't discuss any details of the actual incident as it would compromise the integrity of the ongoing criminal independent investigation. So, Justin, you want to start it off?
Sure. And, in light of that, I wonder how long it took you to write that. Second, I think, it's very important for not only the people on this call, but of course, anybody who might be listening in, hopefully they will write in as many questions we can get in that hour that we left off. But, we're not here to necessarily play reporter. Like I said before, that this call PACT is about, unfortunately, this is a loss of life and that we really, want to discuss over it, but we're not here to play reporter, right? So like we say, man, this day I will agree with that the questions directly about the investigation might have to hold off. But I think this is a great opportunity for any and everybody to ask questions in regards to the processes, what's taking place, and really kind of come up with some solutions on how we can move an investigation along or get details, or do we need details? Those kind of questions out while we have you guys and the professionals on the phone. But I will yield any questions I have for anybody else.
I do have questions. I think, and some of this stuff for the people on the panel, it'll be redundant, but because we do have other people engaged in the online discussion and are asking things in the chat, I will repeat these questions. One of the things that was brought up, I think, in our meeting we had at Boyd Park was, what can we do to be transparent as possible from the police perspective, so that, and I think that was my concern, was we see so many things happening nationally, and one of the questions I had was, what can we do? And I was thinking in my mind, I probably didn't articulate that, how expedient we could be, because God forbid something happen in Gaithersburg and then we have to deal with it. And so how quickly can we set up some processes where the public won't come up with assumptions, won't, I'm hearing this, I'm hearing rumors, I'm hearing this, what's going on? And people don't know what's going on. And so they're coming to their own conclusions. So we well understand that there is an investigation, and it's good at a third party because it won't look like, well, at least to some, because to some people, police are police. It could be that's your brother in Howard County, you know. But if we don't have processes and things that where we're quickly transparent, I think Officer Dan Lane, we saw, I think Justin, we talked about, he said within 24 hours, we heard something. But when there's nothing that is out that's clear cut and is direct, then people will walk away with assumptions. Then you'll get rumors. And now we have some problems and issues here in our county that we want to avoid that we've seen in other cities.
Yeah, so the inherent balancing act is a thorough investigation that's going to be fact-based and accurate. And so you want a good investigation to get to the facts of the case. These are complex investigations. They're not, it's not like TV where you show up on scene and in 5 minutes you know everything that happened. So it is a complex investigation, and we want a high quality investigation. But then we got to balance transparency, and how can we be as transparent as possible? Some of the ways that we're doing it is being here talking to you guys today about the processes that are going on. About releasing information, so in an investigation of this type, there's going to be two opportunities to release information. It's going to be the initial release within 24 hours of the incident, and the Chief Soroka, did a press conference, I think within 2 or 3 hours of the actual incident starting. And then there's going to be during the investigation, what information, if any, are going to be released. And so the frustrating thing for us is, we don't control any of this right now. We're literally on the sideline. And so when we talk about what information and details are being released at the initial scene of the incident, let's kind of, it's the same concept that's with every major criminal investigation that's being covered by the media. Okay, let's take the officer involved shooting component out of it, and let's talk about a civilian on civilian homicide. You're going to see the exact same statements being released within the first 24 hours, and there's reasons for that. First of all, you don't want to release any information that you're not 100% certain is accurate. Okay, the last thing you want to do is release information and then have to come back and say, okay, that wasn't accurate, this, and change the story. That hurts our credibility. When you go to these incidents, especially within the first couple hours, that information that is 100% accurate, that 100% that's factual, we can release that information, is very small. There may be a lot of information that you are like 90%, but you got to put the evidence at the scene, the analysis of the evidence, witness statements, that's all going to confirm that stuff. So you don't want to release stuff that's not 100% confirmed. Another component is you don't want to hurt the investigation. A big component of investigation is witness statements, and how do we analyze those witnesses and corroborate what they're saying and compare it and make sure and confirm whether they're a credible witness or not. A lot of criminal investigations will not release details of the crime scene and what occurred, because they're going to interview witnesses and they're going to compare what that witness is saying to what the evidence at the scene is seeing. So if the witness is coming forward and they're describing evidence that is consistent with the crime scene, then that's a credible witness and they can listen to what they're saying. If that witness comes forward and says, what they're saying does not match the crime scene, then we know they're not credible. And so that's a very important component of the investigation, is having witnesses come forward and comparing what they're saying to evidence at the scene. if you watch any documentary on police investigations, they're going to talk about this as high profile criminal investigations that are also covered by the media. They don't want too many details of the actual event because they can't corroborate witness statements versus what's actually at the scene. If they release all those details, they could contaminate the witness statements, influence what they were saying, either subconsciously or consciously, and they lose the ability to assess whether they're credible or not. So that's a component of that. Also, if you look at most, press releases of a civilian on civilian homicide, their initial statements are going to be very similar. It's not going to have a lot of details. It's typically going to be officers arrived on scene, found the victim deceased, suffering from trauma to the body. They don't want to release what kind of trauma it is because witnesses are going to corroborate, and if they're describing the what's actually at the scene, then that's a credible witness and they know they can use that witness. And if they're not, they can't use that witness. So if they're using and looking for a lot of witnesses and they want a lot of witnesses to come forward, that's a tool that investigators use. They will hold back those details. The hard part for an officer involved shooting is we want transparency and people want information as soon as possible. So that's what, what goes on in the initial release of information. Going forward, once the criminal investigation starts, once that incident happened, we called in, Montgomery County Major Crimes Unit, and they're coming in and taking over that investigation. Anytime Montgomery County is the lead investigative unit, we don't comment on that investigation anymore because it's their investigation, okay? It would be improper if, many times they come in, we have an armed robbery of a business. Montgomery County Robbery Section is going to come in and handle that investigation. If there's a first degree assault of a domestic, domestic violence detectives can come in and handle that. We don't, if we get inquiries about details of those investigations, we refer them over to Montgomery County because they are the lead investigators. We're not the ones that are investigating it. We don't have all the details, and it would be improper for us to start releasing information. The same thing, with this, an officer involved shooting, we're not the primary investigators in this. Montgomery County is. Now, it's a little different in an investigation of an officer use of deadly force because ultimately in the agreement, Howard County State's Attorney, because that's where the investigation facts are going to rest. They're the ones that are responsible for releasing the information, and because they're going to be the ones that are going to decide whether this is going to be a case, whether there's going to be a criminal prosecution or not. So the hard part for us is being on the sidelines right now. So how can we be transparent? Before this incident, working with you guys, talking to you guys, communicate, listening to what you're saying, bringing you guys in, showing you what we do, bringing you guys in to talk to our supervisors, and having this meeting right now, talking to you guys and being open to have discussions about, how we're doing things as far as the as far as the independent investigation, and explaining why there's, not as many details right now that everybody wants. So those are the different reasons, ways that we can be transparent. And it's not just, hey, we're going to release all the information and compromise the quality of the investigation right off the bat.
I definitely want to get into what Ashley Morales, hopefully I'm saying your name properly. I'm going to read what she said in the chat. And then I hope she doesn't mind, I'm going to add a little twist to it because I know that you kind of spoke on this a little bit, Officer Vance. But what she writes is, what is the procedure when plainclothes officers approach a civilian who is not committing any crime? Is calling for uniformed officers with body cameras part of the procedure? We are not asking about the Oakland incident. This is a question about protocol. The twist that I want to put in there, because I know that you had already mentioned that he was under surveillance for possibly committing a crime. But I think that's what I've heard a lot, right? Is were there body cams? Because I think based on the mandates from the state that every officer has body cams, the expectation was that any officer is going to have a body cam. So if there was a shooting, there would be body cam footage. Everyone has access to it. And in this particular situation, I think it came out that because they were plainclothes officers, they did not have body cams. So the twist that I'm going to add is not only, you know, are they supposed to wear, or should they call plainclothes officers, but would it be more productive to have non-plainclothes officers, so officers in uniform approach, so we all have that evidence right then and there.
Yeah. So I'll address the body camera thing, and then I'll let Lieutenant Eastman jump on and kind of talk about the plainclothes procedures. There is no state law that requires body cameras on every single officer. We have a policy that every single uniformed officer, and we don't have a policy that for plainclothes. And the reason that we don't have a body camera for plainclothes is because they do covert surveillance, and part of that is that they have to be on foot approaching individuals at times. When we went to our body camera systems, we inquired with Axon if they have a covert body camera model available, and they did not. The only, you know, this is their model that's most prevalent. There's another one that sticks on your head up here. So we did inquire about that possibility because the biggest concern is operationally, if an officer is in plainclothes and they're approaching someone with a big camera like this they're going to know that they're police, and we're going to have it's going to compromise their surveillance and their operations. We have also followed up with Axon recently, and they still do not have a covert body camera that they provide. So so that's in there's most plainclothes officers don't have body cameras for these similar reasons.
Okay, my question, Lieutenant Vance, is, and that's understandable, and I know you probably can't answer this, but when it comes down to investigating and there is no body cam, now we're left with assumptions or just a word of the officers against, you know, the person being investigated or other witnesses. And that's like in this case, you know, there's a lot that has been said on the street about what happened, you know. And again, we don't want to talk about this case, but we want to, okay, what can be done, you know, because that is a great concern that you have an officer with no body cam and now someone is gone, and we just got the officer's word against whomever.
Yeah, that's a good question. So we, you know, we have situations where, you know, you know, these investigations, the body camera footage, if available, is only one component of it, you know. So when you watch these body camera footages, it's not necessarily a clear indication of exactly what did or didn't happen. You know, it's just one part of the puzzle that we're putting together. There's physical evidence at the scene that's going to be analyzed. That's going to tell part of the story. We also are looking for witness statements for anybody that saw something or heard something, and we're using those. So there's a lot of things that go into, you know, not just what the officer says. You know, we're going to look at, you know, what the officer said, what physical evidence is at the scene, you know, analyze that, witness statements, and there's a lot of things that go into it more than just the body camera. I understand the perspective from the community that it seems more transparent if there is body camera, and you know, we've completely engaged the body camera, embraced the body camera concept. We actually have Axon signals, which I don't know of many other agencies in Maryland have, but we have automatic signals that if we unholster our weapon, it activates our body camera. in case the officer forgets. If we turn on our taser, it automatically activates our body camera. If we turn on our lights in our car, it automatically activates our car. So we've made efforts to try to make this as comprehensive as possible. But in this case, with our street crimes unit, because of the operational drawbacks that having this big camera could have on their investigation and safety, we didn't have them on there.
So I have a question, if I can jump in.
Yes.
About the protocol, Officer Vance. When does surveillance turn into engagement, and what is the protocol? And why wasn't backup called to ensure that uniformed officers arrived on the scene so that they could record and continue?
I think.
Yeah, so let me just kind of get into how this whole thing would develop, like what would happen from beginning to end. And so let's say, so members of the street crimes unit being plainclothes get some information about X, Y, or Z. So they are kind of equal proactive and reactive unit. So in other words, they might get information from a source of information that X, Y, or Z is occurring, or they might develop investigation independently that also kind of leads to some kind of criminal activity. So they're weighing all that. They're corroborating that information if they get it from a source of information, and they're corroborating even if they don't have a source of information by personally observing through surveillance or whatever. So I think the question earlier was if they approached a civilian on the street that wasn't committing a crime, that would absolutely defeat the purpose of the plainclothes unit, right? So they don't want to go out there, what they call burn themselves or burn their cars or burn their appearances and things like that on things that are not going to be fruitful. Also, these units really kind of focus on plainclothes units like this are focusing on pattern crimes, your burglaries, your robberies, things of a more significant nature that you would not be able to handle a different way. So I'll give you a kind of a common example. Let's say you have a credible complaint of drug dealing coming out of a house, and not just low-level marijuana. Not we kind of understand the nature of that, but we're like serious drugs, and that drug activity is drawing in other criminal actions, theft from autos, assaults, other robberies in those neighborhoods. So that everybody can kind of agree that lives in that neighborhood that, hey, quality of life is taking a hit here. We need to do something about it. This is where a plainclothes unit would be extremely beneficial, right? Because if you assign that to a uniformed unit, you put a uniformed car in front of that house, it's not going to stop the activity, right? So, that's kind of the thought process behind these plainclothes units, so they can actually get in there, conduct surveillance, verify the problem. First of all, it's not like they can just go in there and then automatically go into the door or apply for a search warrant or whatever. They have to corroborate that information, and that comes through various mechanisms. Like I said, a reliable source of information coupled with corroboration. So for example, if you're seeing a high volume of pedestrian or vehicle traffic coming from that residence, and traffic stops are being conducted and drugs are being recovered, or you're seeing criminal activity in front of the residents independently, or whatever it might be, that's the purpose of a plainclothes unit. So when you get into, so they're not going to, unless they're doing some kind of consensual encounter to advance one of these cases, they're not likely to approach a civilian that is not committing criminal activity or connected to that criminal activity. It runs counter to the purpose of that unit. So when you get into surveillance of a person, it becomes a little bit same concept. Whether it's a stationary object such as a house or it's a person, you have the same issue. So if you get information that somebody's committing pattern robberies, for example, so certain areas there's these street robberies that are occurring, putting a marked car in there is some credibility into that. It deters possibly that crime, but most people that are looking to take advantage of certain situations are just going to move to a different neighborhood or strike at a different time. Therefore, a patrol officer in uniform is not likely going to be able to solve that issue. Somebody that's in a plainclothes unit could actually conduct surveillance on that person and arguably take some action that might be at a beneficial time that is as safe as possible for most people involved. It's never going to be crystal clean. It's never going to be crystal clear when that is, but it's the same argument. If we have plainclothes officers following some subject and they are getting ready to commit that crime, obviously we want to try to prevent that. We might not have the time to call patrol in there. And again, the same problem happens. If you call patrol to get a body cam, that tips the hand and can prevent the apprehension of that person. So it's a really delicate balancing act on where we could use patrol effectively and where we could use plainclothes effectively. But I just wanted to kind of give you some examples of how philosophically this is sliced when we get information about some certain crime rate.
And we do use some, many times they will call in a uniformed unit to make a traffic stop or stop an individual. But if there's a sense of urgency and then or maybe they don't have that opportunity to do that, that's when they would go ahead and approach them at that point.
So there is no protocol regarding how officers under surveillance are supposed to respond in a situation. Nothing on the books with a procedure, step-by-step procedure. If this is happening, then you respond in this way. If this is
there's too many scenarios to create a policy or procedure for every single thing that can occur. It's really you rely on training and experience. So all these officers in plainclothes have had specialized training in these areas. They've had advanced trainings in these areas. So the people that are in those units arguably should have the training and experience to make those calls as they go. There's no one type situation fits all. So sometimes, timing might be better. So for example, if you have somebody that was armed and they went into a convenience store, some people might say, well, that's the best time to apprehend them, where you go in there and the same thing. If you bring in a patrol officer, that person is now cornered and maybe something occurs. Or even the plainclothes unit goes in there into the 7-Eleven or wherever it might be to try to take that person into custody. The same thing could occur. So you're trying to weigh all these facts and circumstances in real time. So if you had to apply some arbitrary protocol in those circumstances, it would be very difficult to apply those in that scenario and quickly. And sometimes timing is of a nature. You might only have a limited opportunity to take action, and if you're waiting for a patrol officer to arrive, so there's just so many factors that kind of go into these situations.
So, Officer Eastman, I have a question.
We don't have anything
to
on
ask,
the books. I'm sorry. We don't have anything on the
go ahead,
books
Lauren.
regarding the actions of our officers who are conducting surveillance.
Yeah, there is policy about surveillance in general. Yeah, for sure. We have, first of all, the use of force policies are always going to apply. There are specific policies about informants. There's specific policies about training required. There's specifics policies about the street crimes units. So yeah, there are guiding principles, but to lay out a step-by-step in each situation would not be practical.
No, as long as there's a policy, I would like to.
Yeah, we can get you any of those policies, any and all of them. I'm sorry, Elder John, do you have a question?
For de-escalation training, and I hear that it is repeated annually, I believe. Is that correct?
Yeah, so our de-escalation training, I'm sorry, you froze for a little bit, so I'd apologize. I was trying to ask Elder John a question. Sorry, I didn't know. To answer your question, yeah, so we have de-escalation training every year. It's built into all of our training mechanisms. So we have elements in every time we train TASER, there's scenarios built in, every scenario is built in de-escalation, same thing with firearms, defensive tactics, all year round. We hammer them in de-escalation. We had talked about this before. We call it training in silos. We avoid training in silos. So for example, if you are attending TASER training, we don't want you to expect to use your TASER every single time. That's going to be improper. Same thing with firearms training. Like, we don't want to do firearms training where every scenario and every drill is you're using your firearm. So we are going to build in firearm scenarios in TASER, or de-escalation scenarios within TASER and firearms, so that that officer never knows what's coming, like in real life. So you can prepare to kind of, they can go through their mental toolbox, like, okay, I've seen this before. This is one where I'm recognizing the signs and symptoms of mental illness, so I want to respond accordingly. We build those into all training across the board yearly.
We also have a certified de-escalation instructor in every use of force discipline. So we have a de-escalation instructor in defensive tactics, TASER, and firearms, and we require that they incorporate de-escalation into scenarios and in the classroom components. One of the ways that we train de-escalation in scenarios is we do in most scenarios live person role-playing scenarios. So we have scenarios where there's officers, training officers or instructor officers that are the role players, and so we reverse who's feeding off of who. So instead of officers going in and reading what the role player is doing, the role player will read how the officer that's coming into the scenario, the training scenario, how they talk and communicate with them. If they are escalating the situation, the role player will escalate it. It will end up in the use of force. If they're using proper de-escalation techniques, then it will de-escalate and it won't be a use of force. And then we'll debrief with the officers afterwards. And if we didn't get the desired effect, we'll provide, remedial kind of discussions and training, and then have them do it again so it's done properly.
Thank you. And I have just one final question about the information that's been released, and wanted to know about the suspect that was killed. I noticed that a lot of the information about his prior criminal history was released to the public. And what is the protocol on officer complaints? How are those handled, and how are those released when incidents occur?
So, whenever we take discipline very seriously. The chief gave you, the city council, a briefing and a summary of internal affairs complaints for the past, I think it was 8-10 years or something, back in December, I believe. Every single complaint that we get, we take seriously. We have a culture of this organization of accountability and ownership, and we have a culture that goes out and performs in disciplined and professional ways. If we get a complaint, we take it very seriously. We contact the complainant within no more than 72 hours. We talk with them, get their version of what it, and first thing that we do is assess whether it's if we assume that whatever they're saying is correct, they're true, and then is that a violation of department policy? So sometimes we will get a complaint that's like, I got pulled over, I got a traffic citation, and they're just angry about it. And they will admit, yes, I was speeding, but and so they're not really talking about, they're just upset that they got a traffic citation.
Officer Vance, in light of time, I didn't want to cut you off. I know you were going on, but I don't know if you were addressing the question specifically what she was asking.
Yeah.
I think she's asking, and correct me if I'm wrong, Lori Ann Sales, I think you were more asking in respect to releasing a person's criminal history. Is there anything about releasing officers' complaint history and kind of equalizing the two, saying that if we can release one, why aren't we releasing the other, or vice versa? If we aren't releasing one, should we release the other? Am I correct in saying that, Lorianne?
Oh, yes. Thank you for clarifying that, Jason.
So yeah, I don't think she was necessarily trying to qualify how you guys handle complaints, but more or less the release of the officer's information in respect to releasing a criminal history.
Yeah, so I think we got to, we need to look into that and consult with the Howard County State's Attorney, and then we don't have a policy on that. So, that's something that we're going to have to work on and communicate with the chief and communicate with the Howard County State's Attorney and figure out, what we're going to release there. I don't have an answer for that right now. I'm sorry.
I think, and I'm sorry, Elder John, we're pushing you off on this one. I know you got something, just hold on to it. But I want to follow up on Lori Ann's question, because I think that's a fair concept, right? If we think it's fair because there's no protocol or rationale or anything listed that we can't release a criminal history, should we be releasing it, period, if we don't even have anything on officers' complaint history that if we can or cannot release it?
Yeah. So it's absolutely something we will consider and evaluate. And then, I'm sure you'll be hearing more information about that.
You're right, Justin, too. It's like one of those balancing acts that Lieutenant Vance was talking about at the beginning, where, this struggle between transparency but independent investigation. It's really kind of finding that middle line, because I know at the outset of this, and I know that was true the night of when Chief Stroka was giving his briefing, that was one of the major inquiries, and still remains, is why was street crime following this person? So that answer wasn't, while wasn't specifically to narrate his criminal history, it was to give context and maybe try to answer that question. Whether that's improper or proper raises a different argument, and you're right about that. But I just want to kind of get behind the history behind how that originally, where that originated from, right or wrong, that's where that came from. And that's something we need to discuss and maybe put in policy, as Lieutenant Vance said.
I know Matt's taking notes. So Matt, as far as our action item for the next meeting, I think we'll open up with this particular question so we can see where we're at information-wise on that. But I do want to get to Elder John's question, if you still got it, Elder John.
Yeah, I do. And again, I'm coming from a public perspective. A lot of what people see is what they see on television, and I know there's a big difference between what we see on television for entertainment and what you all have to really deal with on the streets. And so when a street crimes unit approaches a suspect and they identify themselves, what really lets that person know that it's an officer. Now, when we went through the training, you all may laugh at this, but some of you all remember my scenario was to go in the building. I had 2 officers with me, and I ran in and immediately I said police, and there was shooting going on. And then I was asked a question, why did you say police? I said, I don't know. That's what I saw on TV. It's supposed to say police. They said, no, well, you have something on you to identify yourself as a cop. And then I was asked by one of the officers, was Kim, said, well, what was your call? Well, my call was there was a shooting. Well, you don't have to do that. You have a right to just approach that scene, and you have your uniform says who you are. Now, if somebody is approached on the street with a plainclothes officer, they say police, what else do they have to identify that they really are police? They don't have a uniform. Is there a badge? Is there what outside of, if you can say you're police and show a gun, I might run because I don't know if you're really police. So how does that, or can you guys even disclose that right now?
Yeah, so our officers, you're right, and that's a great question. Like, we've heard about those type of questions, elsewhere in the country as well. And I'll say that when we approach the street crimes, because I used to be a member of the street crimes unit, we by protocol have to have a neck badge that's displayed. If we have time, we also put like a fluorescent armband or something, some other identifying characteristics. That's always going to be the $1 million question. If the person is committing criminal activity, maybe that parlays a little bit more into the credibility of those officers being there. However, if somebody felt like they were doing nothing wrong, to your point, they might be a little bit confused about what's happening. So I understand it's definitely a balancing act between the two. The officers are going to try to do as best as they can, verbally identify themselves, give those commands. You're right about that scenario too, just kind of going back to that. That scenario was somebody was actively getting ready to shoot. So it was a little bit different, but if you do have time and space and distance, the officers should be identifying themselves. I just want to make a distinction between the specific scenario you were in and the specific policies that are enacted otherwise.
Yes. So like I said, we do have it's in our use of force policy that you will use verbal commands and de-escalation if you have time to. Sometimes, like in an active shooter case, you come around the corner, there's someone with a gun, you may not get, be available to do de-escalation, but if you can do verbal commands. Also, if you're in a situation where giving verbal commands in, say, like an active shooter where there's an immediate threat to your safety, deadly force situation, and it's going to give away your positioning by doing it and tactically give you advantage away from you, where it's going to put you in harm's way by doing that. That's a provision where we don't have to, but we have a policy that says you will in all other situations, and we also train that tremendously, and having officers recognize the difference, understand the difference between what is actually verbal de-escalation, what is verbal and verbal commands, and that in those situations, you need to provide very clear, loud verbal commands and identify yourself. Even if you're in uniform, you need to identify yourself. So.
Hey, Justin, do you mind if I'm sorry, I was going to proactively answer that question about cities that are like disbanding or going away from.
I was actually going to say something about that, so I'm glad you brought that up, Eastman.
Yeah, so what we're starting to see, so I think that's in reference to some of the major cities like New York, Chicago, and some others where there was a move away from plainclothes units. However, I will also say that those are starting to unwind. They're starting to circle back because they're starting to some of these cities, the rates of crime are starting to escalate, and so they brought a lot of these plainclothes units back. So it's a great question. It's a balancing act, right? It goes back to the ability for the police to solve certain crimes. Go back to the drug dealing out of a residence. It's very difficult to solve that through uniform presence. If you're talking about pattern crimes or somebody that's committing commercial burglaries or residential burglaries, it's just a balancing act. It's what do we want? Do we want maybe a possible deterrence by a cruiser driving by the right time of day, or do we want a plainclothes unit that has the tactics and the ability to actually effectively address a problem? It's just something we all need to decide. And I just want to talk about that, that's the existence of the plainclothes units and why they're actually coming back in those major cities because of what I just was talking about.
And there is a documentary out there called Dope, and it focuses on Baltimore and the heroin trade in Baltimore. I recommend anyone to go look it up and watch it. It's a fascinating documentary. I think it's like an hour or something. It's just one episode. And focus on the police, the drug dealers, and the addicts. And so they cover it from all angles. There's a very interesting opening scene where they are focusing on a heroin drug dealer coming out of his house. And he's talking about Baltimore in the recent months after Freddie Gray, and how they took away all plainclothes police officers in the city, or he says the state of Maryland, but I think it was confused. But it was a Baltimore thing. And he goes, I love that law. I love that helps our business. And so, these plainclothes units are effective. They have to be run the right way. There has to be internal oversight on what they're doing and make sure that they're focusing on the right crimes and not just going out there and focusing on, minor crimes and just, running rogue. We've seen that in other police departments. So if you have a plainclothes unit that has oversight, internal oversight, and they know their mission and they're going out and focusing on the right crimes, they could be very effective to lower and make its community safer.
Officer Helton, does MCPD have a plainclothes unit?
Well, let Lieutenant Helton or Officer Jones, you guys want to chime in?
Yeah, I'll jump in. We do. We have many. We have about 1,300 sworn officers, and we have at least one at every police station, one of our 6 stations. We have a plainclothes units that focus on just gangs. We have ones that focus just on narcotics on multiple different levels. So we also have, like I said, the stations, and I did it for a while as well. And yeah, for the most part, whenever we go out and we're looking for, like I said, pattern crime, violent crimes such as robbery, things that were like we mentioned earlier, where you would not be effective with a marked unit, they make a big difference. A big difference. I can tell you right now, we're getting a lot of guns off the street right now. Overall, our crime in the district is down about 4 years in a row. It's going down. But there are some things that are really sticking out. Theft from autos is one where we'll identify people, maybe through the investigative work. They'll think, hey, it might be this particular person based on some evidence, kind of like your hunch. Let's go and surveil this guy for a little bit. And they'll go out and watch this person. And at night, you know, if it was a uniformed officer, they wouldn't commit the crime or about to commit the crime. And then after, when it's safe to do so, they'll either intervene, or they will also just they'll call patrol to come do it. One, because they're better identified, right? But also that way they don't give away their surveillance, their vehicles, who they look like, et cetera. The other thing is we've seen a lot of folks, a lot of guns on the street right now. I'm sure other cities have seen it as well. And a plainclothes unit's really helping with this. And these aren't just folks who are. I spoke at a meeting last night up in Germantown. These aren't hunters or gun owners who are coming back and just, you know, accidentally transport their weapon wrong. These are criminals who have been charged and convicted. They are prohibited from owning a gun, period. They're going through the criminal justice system. They're getting out. They are rearming themselves. And they are in your neighborhood here, in Montgomery Village, in Gaithersburg, in Germantown. And, you know, they're arming themselves to, you know, for their criminal enterprise. And fortunately, we have some plainclothes units that are able to follow up on that and get these guns off the road. So it's definitely effective. But, you know, I don't want to steal too much time here, but yeah, we definitely have those units. So I hope I answered your question.
Well, I think you'll get part of my second part. The reason why I asked if you guys had a unit, because I think one of the questions in the chat was about municipalities specifically, and that they're disbanding their plainclothes unit. And I was wondering if it was a size of, you know, districts or, you know, beats or whatever that dictates whether you should have a unit like that, because we know that, you know, of course, City of Gatesburg is within Montgomery County, and your jurisdictions overlap. If you guys have a plainclothes unit that does roughly the same thing, can we say unequivocally that there's a necessary need for the City of Gaithersburg to have one within their municipality?
Yeah, absolutely. And they do, because they focus just within the city limits. And we are, you know, our district is outside of that, and there's definitely a need. You know, the county looked at, when we do budgetary things, and we look at, hey, why do you have these units? What, you know, is this necessary? Because we can have these guys in uniform running calls and justify this. So you look at the numbers and effectiveness and what kind of arrests and what kind of enforcement they're doing it, and for what kind of crimes. And it's definitely needed. And not only that, they can go across into different districts. We've done that before. We'll have especially some really serious stuff where it's like home invasion robberies at night, nighttime burglaries when people are actually home. We had stuff where it's people were breaking into homes and doing things sexually in nature. This is all I mean, the stuff that you hear about in movies, where you will allocate those resources in different part of the counties when it's needed. Also, one thing to keep in mind, you know, we're in the DMV. You know, Gaithersburg City is in the city limits of Gaithersburg or Montgomery County. You know, folks who are out to do bad things, they don't just stay in Montgomery County. They come from all over. They come from Baltimore. They come from DC. They come from Virginia. And having folks who are in that plainclothes capacity who can go outside the jurisdiction to watch these folks, so they're with them when they come back here and the Montgomery County commit that crime, they're already there. That is a huge asset. That's a very big tool. So hope I answer your question.
I had a quick question for the officers. I guess our city officers or the county, but it was my understanding that we kind of staff or create these entities based on the crime rates, or does that have any correlation, the crime rates, to activating or having a street crimes unit and the size of the street crimes unit?
It does and it doesn't. I mean, it's a unit that's been in existence for what, 15, 20 years, Sean?
2003. Yep.
And so, and you know, the problem is you can't just upstaff it, you know, when a certain crime pattern arises, because that experience that these officers have being out there doing the same thing, that is critical in how they do their job and do it safely as possible and efficiently. You know, there are, and they're very focused on what they're doing. You know, they're looking on pattern crimes. They're looking at violent offenders. They're looking at, major drug, dealing that's going on. Not just, we don't focus on, marijuana. We're talking about PCP, heroin, things like that would actually have significant impact in the community that's going on. So we always have that crime, and there's and they also help out with other things like background investigations for applicants. They're very active in that. They also most of them are instructors in other areas of the department. So there's definitely a need for them. They've never been in a situation where there's nothing for them to do.
Okay.
Going back to Lieutenant Helton, I'm sorry, Lieutenant Helton brought it up earlier. I think if you're tracking some of the gun violence and gun activity that's occurring, that is on the rise, it just seems like daily, nightly, there's some gun crime somewhere. That street crimes unit, don't quote me on this, but I know it's about right. They recover at least 20 guns every year. And a lot of those guns would not have been recovered off some of these violent offenders through any other means, right? This is through investigation or something else.
And just if I could add to it too, because I think you asked for the county-wise as well. It's very purposeful in what they're doing. We do a lot of data-driven policing, right? We look at data, we look at information coming in, calls for service, complaints from citizens who call in and say, hey, this is going on in my neighborhood. We get a lot of those anonymous tips, emails to me, other command staff, and this is going on. A lot of it also, so if there's trends going on, and unfortunately we see times of the year where there's certain crimes, depending on the season, the weather, what have you, but there's also, they work hand in hand a lot with our investigators. So there's a lot of case enhancement that may happen. And that also drives the type of, we have investigators do a lot of different things because of a lot of different crime that occurred, from if it was child abuse to, sex offenses, to domestic violence and so forth. It's really good to have a specific investigator who's focused on those and very good and experienced and trained to investigate those kind of crimes, but also to have a unit that can go out and get case enhancement to see, hey, we think it may be this person, or this might be going on, or what have you, and be able to do that surveillance not only on the street, that computer workup. There's a lot of information out there on the web, free internet information that's out there, such as criminal history. I think that was brought up earlier. You've been arrested and you're an adult, it's free information. You can look it up. It's on a Maryland case search.
Yeah.
So having that information is key. So those units are definitely, definitely needed.
And a quick question for the plainclothes officers: in addition to carrying their gun, the neck badge, and a fluorescent armband sometimes, do they also all carry tasers?
You're on mute.
Yep, they do not always carry tasers, although they have tasers available. So by protocol, we made, if they have time, and if something's rapidly evolving, it might add a little bit of difficulty to this, but they do, if they have time, someone within that unit, if they have time, should have a taser available during that. But I can tell you that from experience, these tasers are pretty big and bulky. And it's hard to put a lot of stuff on just a regular belt, let alone a full size belt. So it's very difficult to stack handcuffs, magazines, all the stuff that kind of goes on there, and a taser. But we do, when time permits, instruct them to have at least one taser available.
Okay.
And ma'am, identifying yourself when you're in plainclothes capacity, identifying yourself as the police, especially when you're taking police action, we do not take that lightly, because you have officers responding in. They don't know who you are more than likely, or if it's dark, you know, we don't want to get, you know, them seeing us and all they see is a gun. They don't see my badge or an armband. I don't want to get shot by the responding police either, right? So, and there's times where, you know, they might think we are, you know, comply just like we would anybody else to their commands. So it's really important to make sure if we're going to take police action that you definitely have at least the minimum things on that we talked about earlier to make sure you're identified.
Okay, and then I'm wondering if the county or the city has a gun buyback program ever instituted? Because I know in New York City, California, Baltimore City, those have been very successful. So, I mean, we do?
We do not. We do
Oh,
not.
okay, okay.
Actually, LT, if I can comment, we actually did one 4 or 5 years ago in partnership with Montgomery County Sheriff's Office, Montgomery County Police, Rockville City, and us. It wasn't a gun buy program. It was a program where people can turn in unwanted, unused firearms. And I believe we gave gift cards out, but we didn't give any, there's no gun buy. We never exchanged money for it or anything like that.
Do you recall how many guns were collected and how long it lasted?
We did it one time as a group, you know, like I said, between here and Montgomery County area. We did it up at the fairgrounds, and I don't recall there being that much coming in. It was a small amount of things turned in. I would have to go back in my records and see, and I can do that and check and get back to you on that one.
Thank you, Officer Lane. Okay, that's all I had.
Any further questions? We're approaching 4:30, 3 minutes till 4:30. I know we scheduled till 2. Questions to be answered up till 2, but I know we, like I said, didn't want to burn people out with, you know, more than an hour and a half of conversation. But if there's any pressing questions you guys have, let's get them out.
I have one question. When it comes to the investigation, the public, you know, you stated that once the investigation is done, then it gets released. What is the typical time frame? Because, you know, in prior cases like Ahmaud Arbery, it took months, and, you know, vital information could have been presented earlier, which could have helped the case. So what is a typical time frame when it comes to an investigation?
Yeah, typically there's a lot of things that go into these investigations, and you know, unfortunately, to do the investigations properly, they can't rush through them. I would love for them to be able to get it done quicker than longer, because that I want to get to that point. But you know, these things unfortunately take time, and we have not really been given a timetable that I want to necessarily, you know, say it's going to be 2 months or a month or something, because there's a lot of different factors in how many witnesses they're interviewing, what kind of evidence they're seeing, and what kind of evidence they're analyzing, results of those analysis and stuff like that. So typically what we see is 2 to 3 months to get through to the state's attorney's office. But, you know, I don't know how long this will go, unfortunately.
Chris, let me add something to it real quick.
Yep.
And I think that has really pushed it too. I think I've seen some here with other incidents like this, at least 6 months. I recall one that happened down in the Wheaton district. It took over a year before the findings were done because of Howard County was backed up. You got to remember this is an independent investigation. There's multiple levels to make sure that transparency is there and independence is there. You have us, Montgomery County, you know, we work well in 6th district, but these are homicide detectives who different bureau of the police department. They don't work in the 6th district. They're coming here doing their investigation. Our forensics are coming. They're collecting all the evidence. They have to process that, find the facts. They then give it to Howard County State's Attorney's Office. Howard County can direct them to do more things, gather more information, et cetera. And then they're going to look at everything with that prosecuting body right there. So it can take a while. And a lot of times there's a lot of scrutiny into this, you know, with an officer involved shooting. And let's say also, you don't want to mess something up. Let's say an officer did something wrong, right? And we don't do things right. We don't do the investigation right. There's a lot of pressure to get things done and pushed out fast, and we do something wrong in the investigation, and somebody did something wrong, but now we can't prosecute them because we messed something up. Just like, they have rights as a defendant, just like anybody else. So we want to make sure we do things right. And that's why I found in an instance like this, it's really important for stakeholders like yourselves who are working with us to go back and tell the community, hey, look, I'm working with these guys. We just got to be patient. They're going to tell us. We just got to hold on. And that's the hardest part.
I think I want to piggyback off of what Matt was saying and dive a little deeper, right? When something's open-ended, like when we say ongoing investigation, right? We just kind of say it's ongoing. Like you said, it could be up 2 to 3 months, and you said, man, that's even good, because you said you could go 6 months, a year, further, in relation to what the community sees. And like Elder John had said, and I'm trying to tie this all together, Elder John said, they come to their own conclusions. Is there benefit in finding a time frame that could work, where you say, we have time to do this, and if it hasn't been done by this time, we can then outsource it to this department that might have more time, so we can meet more deadlines and qualifications, so that there isn't public unrest, or maybe there's a release of certain information at certain stages that might not impact the investigation overall anymore, but is still being held until the end of the investigation.
Yeah, Howard County has been fortunate enough to volunteer to help out. I think they got the short end of the stick because we haven't had to do many of their investigations. But yeah, there's just not a lot of jurisdictions that have the resources like we do here. But it's our state's attorney's office that is handling the fact-finding piece once all the facts are given to them, whether or not it goes to indictment, prosecution, et cetera. So it's tough. But to ask other jurisdictions, they may not be interested in doing it. It's really tough, a tough sell. But they've agreed to do this. They do it as fast as possible. Like you said, it's something. The wheels of justice sometimes are square because they turn really slow. But they're there for a reason, because you want to make sure you're doing everything right.
Can I ask one question here, Justin?
Sure, man.
Question, and right in line with this, I know generally when it's an officer-involved shooting, the officers are put on leave, and just again, will come from a public perception. Are those officers on leave until the investigation is done, or are they allowed to go back to work prior to it being done? Because if someone knows, okay, they see the officers' pictures in the paper and say, okay, these guys were involved with the shooting, nobody's hearing anything about what's going on, and so nothing's being given to the public. As Just said, maybe something we said, we're still doing this every month or whatever it is, because if they see, okay, well, this officer's back on the street, what happened to the case? How soon do they go back to work?
So for us, the officers are going to be off the street until the criminal investigation is complete. Okay, and it just depends on what the findings of that investigation is and what Howard County decides, and then we're going to go into the administrative investigation. But we will hold them off the street until that criminal investigation. So because we don't really know all the facts, just like you. We don't know all the facts until we get that finding from Howard County and that's released. So that's when we'll evaluate it again and determine, what the next step for them. It may be to hold them out longer if the situation dictates that, but it may not be, so that'll be the point and we will obviously let the community know what the status is when that changes.
Cool. Unless someone says otherwise, I think we've come to a logical stopping point. So of course I want to thank everybody who did, watch from home or who will watch in the future. Of course, that's always the benefit of recording it. Thank you, Officer Vance, for all the informative questions. Hopefully we didn't, come at you guys too hard, but at the same time, this is part of it. This is part of what we signed up for, right?
This is exactly what we signed up for. And I want to thank you guys, everybody that, John, Matt, Justin, Lori Ann, thank you for coming on and talking with us. asking these questions so that we can get this information and questions from the community out there. This is part of the transparency that we can provide. And so this is what we signed up for, and this is what we're going to do in the future as well.
For anybody
Thank
who
you.
would like to be a panelist in the future, we have created a Gmail account for you to, send your interest or any questions you want to be, you want to ask in advance. It is pactgburg@gmail.com, PACT gburg, GBURG@gmail.com. It is filtered by someone like myself. It actually gets sent directly to me, so I get a chance to see who would like to be interested. We can create a dialogue prior to and try to get some more questions and engagement. And our goal is always to reach as many people as we can so we can, affect some positive change here in our community. But thank you guys again.
All right. Thank you all. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah.
Have a good night.